The late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the dry earth as Camilla, with her worn-out denim and dusty boots, held tightly onto the rope of Estrella, the smallest colt. He whinnied softly, confused by his new surroundings. The small wooden stable she owned seemed to be fighting against time. Loose boards, a musty smell, and an air of abandonment. But for Camilla, it was everything. This stable, however modest, was the beginning of something great. In the distance, the roar of an old truck broke the silence. Camilla's heart pounded. It was time. As the truck passed through the gate, a cloud of dust rose, forcing her to shield her eyes. When it stopped, the driver jumped out, opened the back, and revealed the three colts, Bronze, Thunder, and Estrella. They were even more scared than she had expected. Their hooves trembled as they hesitated at the edge of the truck bed. From the side, a tall man approached with a smirk. Ramiro, the foreman of Senor Aitor, the wealthy farm owner. His straw hat barely covered the arrogance in his eyes. "There you go, little girl," he sneered, gesturing at the colts. "A little gift, though I doubt you'll get anything good out of them." Camilla clenched her jaw but said nothing. She wasn't rich, nor did she have resources, but something told her that these three animals would change everything. A farm assistant handed her a clipboard. "Sign here. The paperwork from Senor Aitor. He wants nothing to do with these foals anymore. They're yours now." Camilla's hands trembled slightly as she signed her name. As she did, Thunder let out a strong breath through his nostrils, almost as if protesting against being labeled useless. Bronze, the most elegant of the three, lifted his head and stared at the horizon, his sharp instincts already kicking in. Meanwhile, Estrella, the smallest and most timid, pressed closer to Camilla, seeking the comfort of her presence. Ramiro scoffed. "Don't fool yourself, girl. They're weak and useless. But if you want to waste your time, that's your problem." Without another word, he turned and walked away, chuckling under his breath. Camilla took a deep breath. She would need all the help she could get. Alan, an old farmhand who had once worked with Camilla's late father, approached and patted her on the back. "Don't listen to them. If anyone can take care of these animals, it's you." Together, they set up a makeshift pen beside the small stable. The boards were cracked, the nails rusty, but it would have to do for now. As soon as the colts were secured, Camilla checked her supplies. She barely had enough food to last a few days. Just then, a familiar figure appeared. Donna Rosa, their kind-hearted neighbor. She carried a sack of wheat bran and placed it beside Camilla. "I saw the truck arrive. Thought you might need this." Camilla's throat tightened with emotion. "Thank you, Donna Rosa. I don't know how to repay you." The older woman waved her off. "No need for thanks. Hard-working people deserve a chance." That night, as the colts ate, Camilla heard whispers from the passing workers of Senor Aitor's farm. "She really thinks she'll make something out of them?" one scoffed. "They're rejects. Just imagine her trying to race them," another laughed. Camilla pretended not to hear, but deep down, anger simmered. She turned back to Estrella, stroking his mane. "They say you're weak, but I know you have something special," she whispered. "We'll prove them all wrong." The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Camilla was already outside. She watched as Thunder pawed impatiently at the ground. Bronze stretched his neck towards the sky, and Estrella cautiously stayed near her. She needed money, and fast. Determined, she took out her mother's old cake recipe and rushed to Donna Rosa's kitchen. They baked small cakes and wrapped them carefully. Camilla then rode her bike to the town square, setting up a small makeshift stall. By the end of the day, she had barely made enough to buy feed. Alan, noticing her frustration, approached. "Don't get discouraged. Every little bit helps." As she returned home, she saw Ramiro waiting for her, a cruel smile on his lips. "You should stop dreaming, girl. Senor Ater doesn't like people messing around where they don't belong." Camilla's hands balled into fists, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I'm not bothering anyone." Ramiro chuckled. "Watch yourself. You don't have the resources, you don't have the structure. You'll lose everything." He turned and walked away, but the threat lingered in the air. Camilla looked at her 3 colts, now watching her closely. No, she wouldn't let anyone take them away. As the days passed, Camilla began training the colts in an open field lent to her by a friend of Louise Galvon, a local trainer. Thunder displayed bursts of speed that startled even her. Bronze moved with effortless balance, and Estrella, though hesitant at first, slowly gained confidence. One afternoon, Louise approached her. "Have you thought about entering a race?" Camilla hesitated. "I don't have the money for the entry fee." Louise scratched his head. "There's a regional tournament coming up. I can get you a discount or even a small loan." Her heart pounded. Could this be their chance? Before she could answer, Ramiro appeared from behind an old fence post, his arms crossed. "So, you really think you can enter a competition?" he sneered. "That's cute." Camilla refused to be intimidated. "You'll see." That night, she sat beside Estrella, running her fingers through his mane. "We have to win," she whispered. "It's the only way." The day of the competition arrived. Camilla, Alan, and Dona Rosa loaded the colts into a borrowed truck and drove to the event. The arena was filled with professionals, their horses sleek and muscular. Camilla felt small, but she pushed the fear away. Senor Ater rode into the warm-up ring, his expression cold. Ramiro stood beside him, arms crossed. Camilla took a deep breath. The first race was Thunder's, a short sprint. When the signal sounded, Thunder took off, hooves pounding against the dirt. He ran alongside trained thoroughbreds, but at the last second he surged forward, crossing the finish line ahead of the favorite. Murmurs of shock rippled through the crowd. Senor Ater's face darkened. Next, Bronze competed in an endurance test. Though not the fastest, his steady pace impressed the judges. Estrella then completed a low-jump course with surprising agility, earning scattered applause. The final race was the ultimate test. Thunder against Senor Aitor's prized stallion. As the signal blared, Thunder galloped forward. The race was neck and neck. At the last moment, Thunder surged ahead, crossing the finish line a fraction of a second before the stallion. Silence fell. Then, cheers erupted. Senor Aitor clenched his fists, his expression livid. Ramiro paled. Camilla dismounted, running her hand along Thunder's neck, tears brimming in her eyes. "We did it!" As reporters surrounded her, a judge stepped forward. "These colts," he announced, "descend from a famous bloodline." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Senor Aitor's attempt to hide their potential had failed. Ramiro slunk away, knowing his schemes had crumbled. Camilla stood tall, looking at her 3 champions. "They were only weak," she said, to those who refused to see their worth. Camilla woke up before dawn, the events of the previous day still fresh in her mind. The weight of Ramiro's threats, the uncertain future, and the responsibility of caring for the 3 colts pressed heavily on her chest. But despite the challenges, a small fire of determination burned inside her. She stepped outside into the crisp morning air, where a faint mist clung to the ground. The colts stirred at the sound of her footsteps. Thunder, always the most restless, pawed at the ground, eager to move. Bronze stood calmly, his dark eyes scanning the horizon, while Estrella, still timid, took slow steps toward Camilla, seeking comfort in her presence. She stroked his soft mane, whispering, "We'll be okay, I promise." Alan approached, rubbing his eyes. "You're up early." "I need to figure out how to feed them past this week," she admitted. "I barely made enough selling the cakes." Alan sighed. "I can try talking to some people in town. Maybe someone will be willing to sell feed at a discount." "That would help," she said, already feeling the stress of the day creeping in. They worked together to clean the stable, reinforcing the fence with whatever spare wood they could find. Every board they nailed down felt like a small victory against the odds. The morning passed quickly, and soon the heat of the sun bore down on them. Camilla wiped the sweat from her brow, then took out what little food she had left for the colts. She distributed it carefully, making sure each one got a fair share. Just as she finished, Donna Rosa appeared, carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "I brought some fresh bread and a little honey. Thought you could use something to keep you going." Camilla smiled, grateful beyond words. "Thank you, Donna Rosa. I really don't know what I'd do without you." The older woman patted her shoulder. "You just keep going, girl. That's what matters." As the afternoon wore on, Camilla led Thunder to a small clearing near the stable, a makeshift training ground. She needed to see how he handled structured movement, even with limited space. As soon as she loosened his lead, Thunder bolted forward, his muscles rippling under his sleek coat. He had power, raw, unrefined energy. Bronze, tied nearby, watched intently, his ears flicking forward. Estrella, always more hesitant, stayed close to the fence but seemed to observe Thunder's movements with growing interest. Camilla called Thunder back, rewarding him with a gentle stroke along his neck. "You're stronger than they think," she murmured. Alan leaned against the fence, watching. "He's got speed, but we need to refine it. If he wastes all his energy at the start of a race, he won't last." Camilla nodded. "We'll work on it." Just as she was about to start another exercise, the sound of approaching footsteps made her tense. She turned to see Ramiro walking toward them, his usual smirk in place. "You're wasting your time," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "Senor Ater doesn't like people playing where they don't belong." Camilla's jaw tightened. "I'm not playing. I'm training my horses." Ramiro chuckled. "Horses? These?" He gestured at Thunder, Bronze, and Estrella. "They're rejects. You'd be better off selling them for scraps than embarrassing yourself." Camilla took a slow breath, forcing herself to stay calm. "I don't care what you think." Ramiro's smirk faltered for a brief second before he took a step closer. "You don't get it, do you? People like you don't win, and if you're smart, you'll stay far away from the competition." Alan stepped forward, his stance protective. "That sounds like a threat." Ramiro held up his hands in mock innocence. "Just a friendly warning." Camilla met his gaze with unwavering resolve. "You're wrong. I will enter that competition, and when I do, you'll see exactly what these rejects can do." Ramiro's expression darkened, but he didn't say another word. Instead, he gave a low chuckle, tipped his hat, and walked away. Camilla's hands trembled as she clenched them into fists. Alan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Don't let him get to you." She exhaled sharply. "I won't. I just need to figure out how to get into that race." Alan nodded. "Then, let's make a plan." As the sun reached its peak, Camilla wiped her forehead and leaned against the stable wall, trying to steady her thoughts. The confrontation with Ramiro had left her uneasy, but she refused to let fear take root. She turned her attention back to the colts, Thunder, Bronze, and Estrella. They depended on her, and she would not fail them. Alan walked up beside her, his arms crossed. "So, what's the plan? You said you want to get into the competition. How do we make that happen?" Camilla exhaled slowly. "First, we need money. The registration fee isn't cheap, and I still have rent to worry about." "Selling more cakes?" Alan suggested. She nodded. "And maybe some extra work in town, cleaning houses, odd jobs, anything that pays." "I can help," he offered. "I know some people who might need repairs done. Maybe I can pick up work and we'll split the earnings." Camilla smiled, touched by his support. "That would mean a lot, Alan." Before they could discuss further, they heard hoofbeats approaching. Both turned to see Luis Galvão riding up on his chestnut mare, his hat pulled low to shield his eyes from the sun. He dismounted with ease, looping the reins over a fence post. "I've been hearing things," Luis said, dusting off his sleeves. "Word is spreading about you and these foals." Camilla tensed. "Good things or bad things?" "A bit of both," he admitted. "People are impressed that you're training them considering where they came from. But Senor Heitor's been running his mouth, making sure no one takes you seriously." She sighed. "Of course he has." Luis studied her for a moment. "That man's got power, Camila. But if you play this right, you could turn it against him." Camilla frowned. "How?" "He's been boasting about his horses, saying they'll dominate the competition. If you get in and actually do well, it'll humiliate him. People love an underdog story." "That's exactly what I want to do," she said, determination flaring in her eyes. "Then you need to get into that race," Luis said simply, "and I might have a way to help." Camilla's heart skipped. "How?" "There's a regional qualifier next week. Smaller event, fewer barriers to entry. If you can prove yourself there, you'll have a chance at the main competition." Alan's eyes widened. "That could work?" Camilla hesitated. "What's the catch?" Luis smirked. "No catch, but you'll need to be ready, and you'll need an official sponsor." "A sponsor?" she repeated, suddenly feeling the weight of another obstacle. Luis nodded. "Someone willing to vouch for your horses and cover the registration fee." Camilla's shoulders slumped. "I don't know anyone who would do that." "I might," Luis said. "There's a breeder in town. Doesn't like Senor Heitor much. If I can convince him that you're worth betting on, he might help." Camilla felt a flicker of hope. "You really think he'd do it?" Luis shrugged. "Only one way to find out. I'll talk to him tomorrow." She exhaled, a small smile forming. "Thank you, Luis." "Don't thank me yet," he warned. "There's still a long road ahead." After Luis left, Camilla turned to Alan. "If this works, we might actually have a shot." Alan grinned. "Then let's make sure we're ready." That evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of purple, Camilla sat outside the stable, watching her colts graze. She felt the weight of everything on her shoulders, the rent, the threats, the competition. But for the first time in a long while, she also felt a spark of possibility. She glanced at Thunder, who flicked his tail and pawed at the ground, restless. Bronze, steady as ever, watched over the others. And Estrella, still shy but gaining confidence, nuzzled Camilla's hand. "We're going to do this," she whispered, more to herself than to them, "no matter what it takes." The morning air was crisp when Camilla stepped outside, rolling her shoulders to shake off the lingering stiffness from another restless night. The events of the previous day still weighed heavily on her, But she couldn't afford to slow down. Today was crucial. Louise was supposed to meet with the breeder, and she needed to prepare the foals for their first real training session. Alan was already by the enclosure, checking the wooden posts. "Fence held up last night," he said without looking up. "No signs of trouble." Camilla sighed in relief. At least that's one less thing to worry about. They worked in silence for a while, spreading fresh hay and checking the water buckets. Thunder was his usual energetic self, snorting and tossing his head. Bronze stood calmly, taking in his surroundings with quiet intelligence. Estrella was improving, sticking closer to the other two instead of retreating to the corners of the pen. Alan finished securing a loose board and dusted off his hands. "You ready to start their training for real?" Camilla nodded. "We have no choice. The qualifier is coming fast." They led the foals to an open stretch of land near the stable, where the dirt was firm and even. It wasn't an official track, but it was the best she had. She adjusted the simple rope halters, taking a deep breath. "We'll start with short sprints. I need to see how they move under pressure." Alan positioned himself at the far end, while Camilla prepared Thunder for his first run. She gave him a moment to settle, then gave a soft whistle. The colt surged forward with raw power, kicking up dust in his wake. His strides were long, strong, but slightly uncontrolled. He needed refinement, but his speed was undeniable. "Good boy," Camilla murmured when he reached Alan, stroking his mane. Bronze was next. He didn't explode forward like Thunder, but his movements were smooth, calculated. He didn't waste energy, keeping a steady pace that hinted at endurance. Camilla smiled. He might not have Thunder's raw speed, but his stamina would be invaluable. Estrella was last. She hesitated, shifting her weight nervously, but when Camilla gave her a reassuring pat, she took off. Her pace wasn't the fastest, but her agility stood out. She maneuvered effortlessly, responding to the subtlest cues. With the right training, she could become a strong competitor in technical courses. Alan let out a low whistle. "They're better than I thought." Camilla grinned. "They have potential. We just need time." But time was the one thing she didn't have. Just as they were leading the foals back to the stable, a familiar voice interrupted them. "Still wasting your energy, I see." Camilla turned to find Ramiro leaning against the fence, arms crossed. His expression was one of amusement, but his eyes held something sharper, something dangerous. "What do you want?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. Ramiro shrugged. "Just checking in. I hear you've got your sights set on that qualifier." "That's none of your business," Camilla replied. Alan stepped forward, his stance protective. "Leave, Ramiro." The foreman chuckled. "Relax. I'm just giving her a friendly warning. She should know that things have a way of falling apart when people step out of place." Camilla clenched her fists, biting back the urge to respond. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. Ramiro tapped the fence with his knuckles and pushed away from it. "Enjoy your training while you can," he said before strolling off. Alan muttered a curse under his breath. "He's not going to stop." Camilla exhaled slowly, forcing herself to stay calm. "Then neither will we." Later that afternoon, as she was tending to the foals, she heard the sound of hooves approaching. She turned to see Luis riding toward her, a knowing look on his face. "Well?" she asked, barely able to contain her anticipation. Luis dismounted, tying his horse to a nearby post. "I have good news and bad news." Camilla tensed. "Start with the bad." "The breeder won't cover the full cost of the sponsorship," Louise said. "He's willing to help, but only partially." Camilla felt her stomach drop. "And the good?" He still wants to back you, Louise continued. He'll cover the registration fee, but the rest is on you. Camilla exhaled, processing the information. It wasn't ideal, but it was something. That means I still need to come up with money for travel and supplies. Louise nodded. Exactly. But at least you have your foot in the door. Alan spoke up. We'll find a way. We always do. Camilla met his gaze, determination solidifying in her chest. Then we don't waste another second. That night, under the dim glow of an old lantern, Camilla sat by the stable, going over every expense in her notebook. There wasn't much room to stretch her resources. Selling cakes and doing odd jobs wasn't enough. She needed something bigger. She thought about the townspeople, about the small but growing support she'd been receiving. Maybe, just maybe, there was another way. The next morning, she set out early, riding into town with a plan forming in her mind. If Senor Aitor wanted to use his influence to crush her, then she would use the power of the people to fight back. It was time to turn the whispers into something louder. The sun was barely rising when Camilla returned from town, her mind racing with ideas. She had spoken to several people, gathering small donations from those who believed in her cause. It wasn't much, but it was a start. More importantly, she had managed to arrange a deal with a local merchant who agreed to let her sell baked goods outside his store. It wouldn't make her rich overnight, but if she worked hard enough, it might just be enough to keep her and the foals afloat. As she reached the stable, she saw Alan waiting by the fence, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "You're up early," she said, tying her bike to a nearby post. "I didn't sleep much," he admitted. "Something doesn't feel right." Camilla frowned. What happened? Alan hesitated, glancing toward the foals. Thunder was restless all night. He kept pacing, snorting like he could sense something was off. I checked the fence 3 times, but nothing was broken. A chill ran down Camilla's spine. "Did you see anyone?" "No, but that doesn't mean no one was here," Alan muttered. "And after what happened with the syringe, I don't trust anything." Camilla turned her gaze to the foals. Thunder was still pacing, his ears flicking back and forth, eyes alert. Bronze stood nearby, calmer but watchful. Estrella was pressed against the fence, staying close to them for reassurance. She walked up to Thunder, running her fingers through his mane. "We can't let fear stop us," she whispered. "If they want to push us out, we'll just push back harder." Alan nodded, but his expression remained tight. "What's your next move?" "I got some donations," Camilla said. "Not a lot, but enough to help with feed and supplies. And I have a place to sell cakes in town. It's not a perfect plan, but it's better than nothing." Alan smirked. "You always find a way, don't you?" "I have to," she said simply. Just then, the sound of approaching hooves made them both turn. Luis rode in, looking more serious than usual. He dismounted quickly, dusting off his pants. "We have a problem." Camilla felt her stomach tighten. "What now?" Luis glanced toward the foals. "Senor Aitor's been spreading more rumors. He's claiming that the committee is investigating you for fraud, saying you're faking their medical reports." Camilla's fists clenched. "That's ridiculous. I already proved they're healthy." Luis nodded. "I know, but he doesn't care about the truth. He just wants to shake you. If the committee gets enough pressure, they might delay your entry just to avoid trouble." Camilla exhaled sharply, forcing herself to stay calm. "So, what do we do?" "You need to get ahead of this," Louise said. "Go to the committee yourself, show them everything again, and make sure they know you won't back down. If you don't fight it, they might take the easy way out and disqualify you. Alan crossed his arms. And what if that doesn't work? Louise hesitated, then sighed. Then you'll have to win the public over. If enough people support you, the committee will think twice before cutting you out. Camilla swallowed hard. She had been trying to keep a low profile, but it was clear that wasn't an option anymore. If Senor Aitor wanted to turn this into a battle, she would fight him with everything she had. "All right," she said, straightening her spine. "I'll go see the committee today." Alan and Louise nodded, their expressions firm. They had her back, and she was grateful for that. But deep down, she knew this was a fight she had to win on her own. Later that morning, she rode into town, her backpack filled with every document she had. The committee's office was a modest building near the main square, its walls lined with notices about upcoming events. She took a deep breath before stepping inside. The woman at the front desk looked up, surprised. "Camilla, we weren't expecting you." "I know," Camilla said, keeping her voice steady. "But I heard about the accusations, and I want to clear things up before they get out of control." The receptionist hesitated, then gestured toward a door. "The board members are in a meeting. I'll let them know you're here." Camilla nodded and took a seat, gripping her papers tightly. Her heart was pounding, but she refused to let her nerves show. Minutes passed before a man in a gray suit stepped out, adjusting his glasses. He looked her over carefully before speaking. "Camilla, we've received some concerning reports." She met his gaze head-on. "I know, and I have proof that they're false." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Come with me." Inside the boardroom, 3 officials sat at a long table, their expressions neutral but expectant. Camilla placed her documents in front of them. "These are the most recent veterinary reports," she said. "They confirm that my foals are healthy and fit to compete. I also have statements from multiple people who have seen them train." One of the officials picked up the papers, flipping through them. "You understand why this is a sensitive issue," he said. "If any competitor is found to be using unfit animals, it could damage the integrity of the event." "I understand," Camilla said firmly. "But my foals are not unfit. They've been checked and approved. This isn't about safety. It's about someone trying to push me out." The room fell silent. The officials exchanged glances, then the man in the gray suit sighed. "We'll review everything again, but for now, your entry stands." Relief flooded through Camilla, but she kept her expression composed. "Thank you." As she left the office, she felt a new wave of determination rise inside her. Senor Aitor had tried to ruin her, but he had failed, and now she was more determined than ever to prove that she and her foals deserved to be there. When she returned home, Alan and Donna Rosa were waiting anxiously. "Well?" Alan asked. Camilla smiled. "We're still in." Donna Rosa let out a breath of relief. Thank the heavens. But Camilla wasn't done yet. She turned to Luis. "I need your help." Luis raised an eyebrow. "With what?" "I want to make sure everyone knows the truth. If Senor Aitor wants to spread lies, we'll spread facts." A slow smile spread across Luis's face. "Now that I can help with." That night, Camilla sat outside the stable, watching as the foals rested. Thunder's chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. Bronze lay calmly, and Estrella curled up near the fence. She ran a hand through Thunder's mane. "We're going to make it," she whispered. The battle wasn't over yet, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was finally on the right path. She took a deep breath, looking up at the night sky. The stars above seemed to shimmer with possibility, a silent reminder that dreams were meant to be chased, no matter how many obstacles stood in the way. She ran her fingers through Thunder's mane once more, her heart steady with determination. They had come so far, fought through every setback, and now they stood on the edge of something greater. Tomorrow they would step onto that track, not as discarded foals, but as contenders, ready to prove their worth to the world. This wasn't just about winning a race. It was about proving that no one could define their potential but them. And if you believe in never backing down, in fighting for what's yours, then join this journey. Subscribe, like, and share this story with others who need to be reminded that perseverance wins in the end. Because sometimes the underdogs aren't weak at all. They're just waiting for their moment to shine.